You want to take that one?
Do you know what the Long Beach terminal is called on Tap Room?
Jack, huh?
Jack.
H-O-W-E.
Yeah.
Looking for the judges? Are you looking for the judges? I think Sarah's in that. That's fine.
Okay, Cottrell.
Yeah, we have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
I feel like I should be walking around trying to start the dance, but then I see the one
Do you have any unique, just like, actually, you know, yeah, this kind of stuff already. Like that? Okay. You ready to go?
What up?
Hey. Hi.
Thank you.
I'm gonna read that business on our sales, dude. It's so good. It's so good on upstairs. Oh my god.
Pretty much anything the resolution
Allows you space. I know. I always wanted the space topic in college and they never gave it to me. Because I missed it in high school.
You read the space app in the China topic freshman year?
Yeah, there you go. There was definitely latitude on the China topic. Education was a little harder
Was
to
it
get
Wolf
through.
Amendment?
Yeah,
Oh,
the Wolf
Wolf
Amendment. We, first term of the year, the plan text did not say the Wolf Amendment. We were like, you don't say the Wolf Amendment. How does a plan solve? Normal means, you know?
T. That was like a T today. Who was that? That was
We get teams to
A.
conceive GQPQ in place.
Oh, that was
A strat.
PPQ on combo. Like ACs. Alright. Can I steal paper from someone?
Yeah, here, I'm reading it.
Never mind, we do have paper.
blackness is rampant within immigration policy. Black immigration is just as sure it does not pollute white America. Modern day immigration policy replicates the same investment in black legislation, anti-black justice, or the singular purpose of managing the inclusion of science, exclusion of blackness, marking the underwriting logic beneath all immigration policy, caution, and for international migration culture, acknowledge racism in Western nation policy, special preferences for white immigrants, and white position at the top, disdain for black immigrants, characterized policies of the West, global convergence of anti-black racism. Immigrants are incorporated into U.S. racial structure that puts blacks at the bottom. Western nations' harmony of their anti-black racist actions are operating in concert with other nations having transnational global implications, function as systematic or global anti-blackness targeted toward exclusion of phenotypically black persons, operates on a multinational scale. Public policy has a great disdain for black immigration, also makes available opportunities for recruit temporary black labor establishment and it's tempered by fear and a permanent addition to black population for Western nations now employ non-racial language to achieve similar racialized and although Canada be itself as a haven, immigration of free blacks was never welcome. Canada's policy began with a law that disavowed voluntary black immigration to solve whatever race problems might arise. It's just better not to have any more blacks in the country than necessary. Black migrants in the United States and when the West Indies were referred to as black demons. Constant repetition of these stereotypes made it easier to organize against black immigration, and this is not benign, but rather imbricated within the structural antagonism of civil society. Traditional understandings of immigration borders that can freely be transgressed obscure the black border of cruel optimism that provides white civil society coherence against blackness as social. The death one 1917 central starting point of observation of specific forms of racism has targeted people racialized as blacks in slavery. African pessimism suits the U.S. society's fundamental built on and instructed by anti-blackness and entails violence which Wilderson describes the ontological issues not contingent blacks. So means slave black people outside of humanity is not legitimate to analogize between black people who are positioned socially dead outside society and non-black people who are inside the roots of analogy relation between black and the world should not be understood resolvable, and it's an antagonism. Consider this in relation to broader conceptualization, the antagonism demarcation between blackness outside and non-blackness in society. Anti-blackness manifests as a fortification of society against social that structural bordering the dysfunctional demarcation is absolutely not allowed. Any kind of movement across the border movements have not figured in the conceptual framework. Endeavors have not fundamentally changed the structural position of blackness outside civil society. Changes have not dismantled the epistemological border. The black border repeats itself within debate as discussions of legal immigration distance render invisible the singularity of blackness. Much like these libidinal investments were further entrenched as each body of the cold ocean floor debate gets its coherence by throwing the history of black immigration into a river of ignorance as we pretend the notion of immigrants have been put into ways that render invisible experience of Africans across the United States. Workers migrate singular kind of immigrant experiences failure to appreciate immigration consequences like an engine of ongoing reiteration versus coordination privilege within contemporary American society, thinking without acknowledging the migration transfers racism into our past into our present. The United States indulged in unlimited child slavery and illegal slavery and importation laws, making them the first major pillar of immigration system. Transatlantic slavery was an immigration system of particular reprehensible source of state-sponsored forced migration endorsed by Congress, fulfilling the need for a controllable labor population. Thus, we affirm an analytic of religious in flight from the resolution. The one see centers the future force of blackness as a nodal point to conception life outside captivity, creating new practices for resisting questions of ungovernability and acknowledges the unique singularity of blackness quad and it's up to appreciate the active ongoing ability that can be used provides a way of knowing about forms of life outside the state merges thus historical verification of life outside life into the structure of its serious institutions a way of life right for the petitioners are so frightful in the state of medical section draped to mania to become free you have to be acutely aware of being enslaved by impunity were very much of our social imaginary contemporary repertoire of existence here attending close price of activating the future border crossing resembles merged in the 19th 18th century century propensity to surround freedom community building has barely diminished its size to change the blood activities of image of black radical imagines once merged with the 21st century expressions of ungovernability. Contemporary scenes of subjection include prevailing fight to the anti-slavery abolition did not happen solely a passive emergence, not a metaphor. Slavery's logic, however, requires fight to be characterized as the alternative to recognize emergency embodiment and refuses to be governed to render oneself totally unavailable for servitude. The alternative to recognition being ungoverned or being a slave is wrong to the notion. It's only one condition of the common person. The alternative is the recognition that being ungoverned is not unbig, and our conceptualization is the resistance against the black border. Analytics and rooted in the structure and position of blackness create moments of flight in social life within social death. Long right. It's up to flight until its borders between future and price of worse have been overcome at one minus that flight. That's with borders that live systems across the state African Americans flood their enslaved by present demarcating lines into free territory. What is being social death never ending so practice such as black social life Afro pessimism. Epistemological broader concept the border appears different in level such as social permeable borders. Epistemological zone the concept appears to be more suitable when conceptually social life and face actually constant struggle against social tension may abstract the longer Afro pessimists are this is make a print the relationship and tension between Afro pessimists and Afro future these works a level of experience informed by social life and social death. I compare controls the black border with the context of the fugitive is constant struggle against black border without dismantling the border the concept of fugitivity carries with the potential analysis without propulsive structural analysis position of blackness and demands that going the singularity of blackness replicated. Instead we surrender to blackness. Brady Merle 14 surrender to blackness because they're in hope for revolution practices while minimizing most central blackness and hashtag central job and put upon the common strength black women activists seeking to challenge persistent tension between the communities for the sake of common struggle against white supremacy and hashtag because on both sides but equal in the failure to form solidarity. But watching around much Asian confession we understand Anti-black censorship, attending the very concept of life, ontological, unspeakable, unthinkable, blacks at the underside remains a valid for showing anti-blacks for refusals to engage in anti-blacks, which is now as a foundation of global and singular nature. Blacks all this in the name of coalition politics are possibilities to be fetishized out loud. Anti-blacks is love, unattended renders the imperative illegible instead of fetishizing the object must surrender to blackness. Our analytic refuse the active pathologization of blacks by Western methods, murder distribution to be develops a psychic energy that creates a form of transformative politics and access of political intelligibility. Keysmaker 17 Western states continue to disavow, reproduce disavow grounds for black politics. They can threaten Western critiques and disruptive tactics. The notion that black rage is counterproductive and it needs to be suspended, contained in order to gain legitimization. Debauchery has also been unrepresented because the racial turnout of political words is something key. Inside of black politics, involving these protests centers on making Western democracies white women's found out constitute exclusion. Coalition markets marked by practices of instrumentals and copyrights or rhetorical shunning. The pressing question is the foreclosure of radical transformation to such need to move beyond the status of sole frame for transformation discourse. We need to think against an inaccess that essentiality of the states around the rise of political intelligibility. State-centric brings the black political activism in turn to Western states to safeguard rights and denied limitation of expressed by protest movements. Political authorities to grapple with the pathologization of black rage. We resist the colonization of non-formalized black politics, social pathology to not conceptualize black politics as the problem. The theoretical underpinnings of our theory of power teach refuse complicity within black suffering. Concepts like social death, libido, economy, ontology are good analytical frame, even if they aren't capital T true ready. Evidencing whether you're not by the social death as capital T true theories of social power, political ontology, libido, economy, enable words that speak to black suffering across time and space. When one says thinking embrace as ontology shows that HT shows possibility itself, and blackness itself to logical theory does not do that. The world in theory describes it. Binds the world. State action, institution, ethics, makes anti-blackness worse. The racist, the exploitation of black body, Wilderson, intended regarding the black position, someone else black claims, which successfully made on the state of the civil rights movement, the election of black presidents, like police brutality, massive incarceration, segregated substance schools, and housing astronomical rates of HIV infection, and being turned away and massive post-subcontinental living, experience of black life, the grammar, suffering, known as exploitation, alienation, pursuit of the logical where subjective dispositions are right in the adding the calculation between those who sell labor and those who acquire the proposition of the state and society are asking us to be even contemplate the possibility of a mandatory project for black position disintegrates into thin air. The slave is not the labor, but an anti-human and essentially against the humanity itself. Its action maintains to reduce its coherence and corporal. In second, the slave is generally dishonored that our analysis cannot be approached with the rubric of gains or reversals and struggles within state and civil society, not unless and until the interlocutor first explains how the slave is to the world.
Ready?
Yeah.
What is the 1AC's advocacy?
We affirm analytic emergence as a flight from resolution.
And what does that entail?
So the quant evidence says that flight fugitivity A is refusing questions of governability, i.e. in this debate round we've said that's a resolution forwarding a top-down implementation of policies. Examples the quant evidence gives are things such as border crossing, gender non-conformability. Obviously that's not a referendum on the 1AC strategy, but we think that are examples that fall
Why is refusing the resolution a useful heuristic?
So we think that flight and fugitivity is different. Obviously, yes, refusal is
We have
part
refused
of-
the governability that the resolution imposes. We have began our resolution.
Why is the resolution a uniquely bad form of
So
governability?
two things. I want to clarify the first question is that the app is not just a form of refusal. Maroonage is creating communities outside of the state, which
Okay.
means there's two parts of the app, refusing and then the creation of those communities.
Okay.
We think that that community creation happens here and now in debate for different black debaters that pathologized by the resolution. I'll explain why the resolution is bad. We think that top-down implementation provides cruel hope to different black people that state can fix the plantation without actually resolving it.
Yeah, what is the warrant for state action making anti-blackness worse?
So the Wilderson evidence says that even if you can provide contingent examples of when the state's gotten better, over time, net violence hasn't decreased, and it'd be your burden to prove that. If we win,
Why does that disprove the potential for reforms enacted by the state
so
being
we would
good?
then go to the claim of the libido economy. We think the white psyche is inherently objectified against the black trope. The warrant behind this is semiotics, and that words and symbols are held in constant opposition to each other, which means that in order for the white body to construct itself, it has to be in opposition to what it's not, which will always be blackness, which means that...
How do you know that the white body is always constructed in opposition to what it's not? What is the basis and grounding behind this
We think
claim?
that semiotics and language is the basis for that. The 2AC, if you read cards...
We think like our warrant for that argument is the liberal economy or the...
Yes, but I'm asking about the warrant behind the libidinal economy.
It's that examples over time are not warranted in a rational explanation.
The argument is that there's no rational explanation for this.
You
So,
can't
no
provide-
examples of progress have happened in the past.
No,
So,
it's
ergo,
you will
the libidinal
provide-
economy?
We can start the 2AC here. The answer, the Chico evidence that we read, provides examples such as DL, you're shot 41 times in 1 minute. If you provide that it's contingent against black people, that would explain why shooting 41 black people once makes sense, not why you would shoot one person 41 times. It proves there's no rational explanation for why
Okay.
violence happens in sense.
What is the value of the negative spending 2 hours responding to your app?
We think resistance strategies to combat anti-black violence is great.
No, what is the value of the negative responding to
Yeah,
that?
so we think the role of the negative in this debate is either to prove that the resistance strategy of the 1AC is bad, or provide a counter method to resolve that violence.
Okay. If we drop anti-blackness as ontological, should the judge vote F?
Yes.
Why?
Because you're going to go for a framework, which means state ethics can never solve anything, top-down implementation doesn't solve.
Okay, but why should the judge evaluate the argument if it's dropped?
Because the more we've read evidence, we don't think that evidence comparison is anti-black. We just think that you should compare resistance strategies.
Alright. It's done. 2 off and then case.
NBA read 8 off because Rachel and his name, Samin did against Rachel and Samin, and then there was a blue page in the DNC.
Yeah.
It's like that.
I heard that they read
So when
I heard that they read a lot of stuff that they realized didn't really apply to the F, so then they were like, whoa,
Oh
just read
yeah,
that.
oh yeah, there were 4 disads and a parole counting plan that solved space calls somehow. Not really sure, but it was a good debate. You said 2.
Yeah.
Do you want the case in the order?
Sure? Well,
Yeah, 2 off in case.
2 off in
Okay.
case.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
I'm not really sure.
Where are y'all from? I know Coppell.
Bellarmine.
You're all Bellarmine.
Are we good? First off, framework asks us to defend the hypothetical enactment of the resolution. Resolve means to enact a policy by law, words and phrases 64 resolve is by the legislature established by law. The United States federal government is the national government, and DC blocks law for the federal government, national government that exercise control of small units. Should means mandating something be done near to 9 that should express the way to the authority and horse upheld instruction. The court should command you to your obligation. Topical affirmatives must substantially reduce legal quotas or grounds for inadmissibility. Task seeking their restriction legal obligation thereto. First quota limited number who can have second grounds of admissibility rules. Nonsense for entering debates a game of both here to win procedural questions like T confers the role about this vote for whoever is the better debating of the resolution. Question a vote neg first fairness there interprets those limits and allows after monopolize the moral high ground and the lack of a stable mechanism lets them radically recontextualize the affirm and erase neg ground by permutations. Fairness is good in prior debates a game that requires effective compare competition and negation which makes their offense inevitable cutting next to every possible effort small schools which has a disparate impact on under-resourced and minority debaters. They don't get to weigh the affirmative. It's just as likely they're winning it because we were able to effectively prepare to debate it. And second is self-questioning. The process of researching, thinking about it, reflecting on a topic prior to debating it changes minds without a predictable limited resolution. He's resort to that reaction that entrenched bias is going to need minor 3. The process of rational polarized attitudes about the deliberate people acting has happened before the discussion there. People get to the issue requiring information, thinking hard about it earlier before deliberation there. Maybe this is logic based on information, possibly the whole reason. No reflective deliberation requires us to call on a reason rather just consulting just because the attention on the topic might be able to think hard about ultimately people more the information, thinking about the issue there. May never have an argument to talk changing might be a discussion of things that considerable impact on the way to jurors of the issue might be sequence of debate or resolution to avoid competition for attention. Second off is the cap K, the apps nihilistic focus forecloses effective anti-capitalist politics, rejecting individuals' fantasies is crucial to the collective future. Dean 12. We skeptical to choose the collective suspicion and privilege and individual singularity and matching attention to be larger as one of the larger collective subjects, deliberate activists think that micro activities are more important than large scale like that. Large scale disconnects from the struggle of working people. It makes politics in the west spectrum to the power of companies and the capacity to inspire large scale struggle the left institutes as such a left field company capitalists and company individuals and competition and then privilege letting the lobby disaster class world in the absence of common goals and the absence of a future. The alternative is to orient politics and social struggle toward the communist horizon. This redirection is crucial to redefine the set of imaginable political futures. Dean 12. I used to represent as the experience we get. I never general advisor to the communist a condition of actually not an actual subject to the communist rise of the philosophy, explicitly genesis of communism, Western version gives a great view of left to say, redirects anti-capitalist energy to open a ethical space for discussion that capitalist material analysis that treats capitalism as a system that this was as many things can anger and capitalism collective struggle the left is the last study communist horizon that return the communist re-energize left and invoke the horizon is produce the complete shift of perspective value various forward anything is possible instead of politics in terms of resistance of communist horizon press us the necessity to abolish capitalism create global practice of egalitarian cooperation a case. Successful movements span mainstream 3. They require skilled organization, strategic flexibility, effective management, and proto-institutionalism, sacrificing debate training in favor of being a revolutionary for weekend guarantees failure, hell, and something that the negative rights of the work successful, the role of segregation, discrimination, keeps that amount of politically without a substantial organization, everything is spontaneous, is provided by random actions, shifts taxing harder than movements, diffuse into distorted discussion, moves that proto-institutional organization, flexibility, management structure, determining what they say, a martial law, the attorney general, far from the truth, power, successful movements, to power, the rules of the time, identity, pressure, leading to more competition, practice way, comes to the politics way, thus may be able to think yourself, we can rise the revolutionary free, we can reason to make it political justice, control high court day after the resistance powerless, a self-raised messy, a slow and frustrating activism is an automatic, requires learning to defend a proposal against rigorous negation, to develop skills for strategy, organizing, problem solving, resource development, deployment, and coalition building. Their impact turns are unique because the government will never really try to public capture public anxiety. The only question is whether is creating alternative incentives for political organization lacking 13. Expecting the cycle without giving on CDs, activities, limited with rights skills, ability to stand on civil rights, for decades, and the reason why problems there's nothing about people, strategy to organize investment, to create reach all these resources that can be used by trading, increase area temperatures, and offer one kind of reassurance while the but after realize they can produce people for sure. People how they recover their non-bonus play a really possible scenarios, even understanding of the issue. When we understand separate social connecting rates, creating a connecting move, the increase approximately the anti-nuclear one, the cabinet cities with national social actions, leadership, and democratic decision making this to be the right ability to increase strategy for skill building. Despite Trump's successful movements are not possible, but they require diligent strategies that beyond the immediate gratification of what feels revolutionary in the moment for empirical examples of successful micropolitical transformation like 17. We represent the majority of the voters, opposition voting, helps me receive rather than whichever feels whichever tactic feels good in the moment. Actors we both these institutions should be connected with LGBT movement as well as the equal marriage, equality, the military dialogue, this is obviously and direction 25 never secret to the clear and I'm not talking about powerful social movement, the opportunity to not about the public financial rights and as well as the narrow system as speaking these rights moves can have a transformative impact with the but any proposition as far as other issues of rights because Berkeley Free University reform draft resistant and Vietnam that's the only possible with strategics is making that our model entrenches our model teaches individual protests are historically ineffective but collective action through civic identity building and actualize a policy change frame 16. Positive general location, social security, creating sectors of reality, participate by enhancing political religious policies, using that state for making abilities of on the board, more from the reasonable thing we can educate children over to organization, taking political identities and sales of institutions don't respond to individual demands, a single act of personal can result from change. We can learn the learners of those we disagree with several 47% of the approaches and different ones. Join if it's not received, opportunity the result of the organization, you think a lot of leverage to learn to change policy. You have to adapt to effective because they had better resilient knowledge of the deliberations begin. Avenues for learning blackness and ontological human relationships are a series of constant negations that are repurposed on based on current conditions, solving responsibility for political action, even if it fails to overwhelming failure breeds analysis that redescribes anti-black discord and 17. Anti-black relationship is a process of even puts continue to fight the basic representation of Africans are arguing contradiction to the observation to reinforce that original love Africans and people don't know no one will be responsible for the actions facing the future. The caution is will be instead that whatever is what will be on the future depend the political contribution back to the history of the enslavement was which again a person denied to eliminate this the result of 500 years of consequent enslavement for history African nations would raise again there was the African peasants for to understand what does work to something human it's a conjugation of ongoing references to no one actually establishing a new meaning there whether it's a proposal or just when shifted the references to shifted energy alternative failures of transform population thinking revolution rebellion shifted references and argument focus on taking responsibility to guarantee that moving from resignation becomes political action inward resignation seeking purity of personal class no moralism conceptualizing anti-blackness as a political ontology creates a false dichotomy between destroying this world or being subjected to it that homogenizes the experience of 35 million black people and displaces the possibility of pragmatic policy which will resist anti-blackness plan 17. Looking at anti-blackness within ontologies, not Friday effective analysis of violence, absolute higher gestation, ontological frameworks, and looking at analysis of macro which blackness is which blackness already separate from practice, but the chance to the fact that every policy is simultaneous macro and ontological structure shows the analysis of every how practice of the answer. Apparatus of anti-black is not historically developed into a reasonable relation to the national identity, a philosophical political difference where the to the accepted blackness equals and ontological position also to bring this flow social difference and contingency that space versus black identity racial resisting pressure will just with 35 million black people living in the United States, social black social there's only better ontological decision political resistance that is not only limited to radically political violence. Other may be practically oriented practice resistance. I don't have the absolute discretion for I can't general resistance. Black is absolute framing can only refer to a negative. It has to watch the blank horizon market. Horizon. Even if blackness is a political ontology, policies combat the material impacts of stigma, Barlow, and to capture the still have in response to ontological reasoning completed as Afro-pessimism use essentially to determine the political orientation in a way that's problematic. There's vital if social that concludes the impossible to get to Afro-pessimism, the same sentence who understand black left is nothing as a racist from ontology should not measure liberation, refuse political apathy, the advocacy, pathologize black political hope includes material gains and demobilize tactical resistance by reinforcing self-hatred amid movement failure. Barlow 16. It's material possible to disrupt the deciding on finding points of productivity study. Yes, there are no specific with the notion idea. Any single within deciding from black that has a major problem with first internalization stuff that has a complete violence like that. Standard black resistance destruction and then real difference description of every black resistance history that the subject is beginning another layer reinforcing psychological depression. Secondly, black bodies and enemies ability to state level society where yielding constant levels again is not possible. Affirmative to separate from the material resistance calls for absolute pessimism and abstract flex because rejection of societal norms will have I don't think constant black lives requires strategic growth flinches. Marked up flinches.
Good.
Let me just mark that real quick. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. If the game is violent, can we break the rules?
But the game is not violent.
So the framework argument relies on you winning the game is not violent.
Well, yes.
Our argument is
Our
that
argument-
we access the potential for reforming
No.
through the
My question
liberated
is,
class.
the status quo debate is violent. Do you have to win that it's not to win framework?
The premise is incorrect, but also only debates can help shape the way that debate itself
Okay.
operates.
Neither model
Like-
solves like violent structures in debate. You're endorsing whether a topical debate is good or bad. We will contest the claim that the resolution is intrinsically violent, and other practices outside of that are not resolved by a ballot.
Fairness, why is it an intrinsic impact?
Because it's the only thing that the judge has the ability to adjudicate within this round, especially if there has been an instance of unfairness committed.
So
by your
fairness
side.
is good because of the game is good.
Well, also because you inherently rely on issues of fairness in order to make your argument. For example, if we just
So
dropped,
fairness is then
like for example, in cross-examination, we were like, if we just dropped ontology, would the judge still vote for the affirmative? And you were like, yes, because that relies on the notion of fairness, whereby if one team drops an argument, the other team gets that argument.
How does that? Okay. What's the threshold for how much we should question something?
It's not like a specific
So then how do we
threshold,
know we
but it's that there's an
self-question?
iterative, but it's an iterative process of questioning that
So
happens throughout.
the negative model, how do we know what's enough to be
Resolutional debate is better for prepping clash versus an
Why is
untenable
your
model of
movement-
debate that
why is
exposes
your
limits.
case debate not sufficient for questioning?
Because
It's about the
case-
ask you justify.
Yeah, it's not just about your case. It's about every case that you justify. It's
Okay,
also
so the counter-
about models debate where we can
What does
rigorously.
the communist horizon do for Trayvon Martin?
It creates a sort of system whereby we have movements to combat both the effects of racism but also capitalism. So those social movements can actually effectuate political change.
Do those social movements have to engage the state?
Those, yes.
What about black people who don't want to?
Social movements that engage the state are empirically better.
So what do you do for black people that don't want
Well, I think it's just sort of a flattening argument to say that black people don't engage the
to? There
state.
are black people in the status quo, we've read evidence, that do not want to engage
Yes,
the
obviously
Correct.
the alternative isn't going to force
The
them to do
alternative doesn't
so.
force people, but it says that the movements themselves are
What's
better.
a current black resistance strategy in the status quo that has been empirically successful that you will defend?
For example, Black Lives Matter.
You will defend Black Lives Matter as a good thing.
We will
They're
defend that.
killed in riots in Baltimore, and you will defend that's a good thing.
I think that the state has committed horrible actions against the Black
So
Lives Matter.
okay, let's talk about
But
that.
I think-
What progress
I
has
think-
Black Lives Matter enacted?
Well, I think there have been changes in police violence, the way the
They
correctional
have.
system
They've been
operates.
statistically gone down. You will defend them.
We will defend that. Well, we will defend the ontology debate, which is your burden of proof to say that there has literally been no change that's happened.
Okay.
You can't even see. The thing is, you can't even say that blackness, like anti-blackness, has gotten worse because that proves that things can get better. You need to literally prove that it's the same.
We haven't studied ours. What's the current condition that explains anti-black violence? So the Gord evidence says the current conditions explain it.
Our
What's the
point,
current condition?
the negative's point is that there is no totalizing theory that explains anti-blackness. So your
The Gord evidence
criticisms of
literally
liberal
cites
progress
that
don't
there's a
really
current
apply.
condition that explains anti-black violence. This is a quote from the card. Cool. Yeah, okay, so.
You decided that?
I've decided some of them, and not all of them, but during lunch I'm gonna disappear to the sixth floor. Just furiously right balance.
You're
Alright, I just have another tell me about it.
Well, the first year I did around I went overkill, and I stayed up till like 2 a.m. and I did like perfect 15 minute ballots that nobody was ever gonna read. And I'm just like, your problem, SBB, is that you care too much. You cared a little less, you'd be okay. So the next year I was like, one paragraph, 250 words, right? And I did okay with that, but I didn't feel like I got too many comments, feedback, like, will you explain this, will you explain this? I'm trying to like find a happy middle ground, right? It's like Goldilocks questions here.
Alright. Let's do case, framework, new flow, and then cap. So what is just case, the order of the line C, and then framework and flow cap. Is that not good? Alright. D1 is the recent discussions of immigration at the black border that structurally black, non-black, and migrants rematriculate itself into the border apparatus and debates with liberal investments and anti-blackness. The impact is social that production of blackness into a fundable object leads to which the response of black immigrants becomes token to be exchanged globally that Vashi vote affirmative as an analytic of Maroonage that flees the status of governability to develop social life and social death here in the Holden way through communities of care by surrounding to blackness. This creates a material synaptic reward for our affirmation that rethinks and rebars and neural attachments to immigration's optimistic imposition of life and antagonistic to blacks. I'll do the movements debate here. We saw movements, community organizing in our maroon communities, arguing for black people that have material implications. When we see quants that there's pragmatic examples like border crossing, bedroom, gender doctrine, religions, etc. All as examples of how black people can participate in maroonage. The pragmatic approach cross-apply when we see what is any of us that we win. The semiotic conception of blackness for women, their modern that their movements office is always fractured and reproduces anti-blackness because it can never overcome humanism. Liberal economy is true, it overdetermines the political as she go. And then we see the liberal economies that work, liberal economy of fear, trans political economy, power, graphic, distinction, graphic, things that are transformed by the yellows, making the criminalized conflict, order for the rich. Here's another for the doll test, also for the liberal economy as she go. And 17 doll studies, we see the next representation of black means about how also children have it, the children have it turned by many things, they internalize the liberal economy of black states, certainly systematic shifts in church even before we're born. Also see the political is not unique for the black party because it's socially notion. There's no political backlash that can expand the statical automatic fiscal violence. Your model of debate provides movements. Here's Holson and Tall, fiat that we will opportunity and actively no one is saying that the rounded top doesn't like the power discourse is different from the performance debate argues against their action. Is that the biggest because we stated debate the problem is that it disconnects you from the real world, takes away from the what you as an individual person can do because you're constantly pretending to be something that you're not also, but ours can create movement for black people as Holson. And to produce the performance debate CRT of speaking of white supremacy conversation debate or my purposes are involved with LBS, aliens, and problems regarding issues facing black people training for the real world and the community and their communities of Gordon. And there's a framing issue B. One is across the there's no counter theory of power that they are proposed that can explain why anti-black lives operate. Semiotics should be the framing for Gordon because it's in the context of existential ontology, not political ontology. He can see that societies have together through action of the majority. This means that you can view this way through semiotic because words and symbols are held in constant opposition to each other. And blackness will always set the negative standard for the semiotic conception of whiteness. Pragmatic action can never change signs in relation to how humans view the world, which is the first thing is even if violence is contingent, the act is a better political strategy and a prerequisite make. The anti-semiotics will signify never changes our arguments that the system will change a form of violence by not whether it occurs in the first place, that was the time of accumulation to be decline, and it's a length of the specific warrants here. One, clients being essentialized black people, civil society does essentialize all black people ontology over determines and forms specific identities of black people. Essentialization is also good because it avoids fracturing from something by institutions that was a Brady. And it's also B that subquest says black political analysis of ontology precludes specific analysis, but Klein never gives examples, so you should be skeptical. So Klein also says that we preclude forms of pragmatic resistance, but we are pragmatic. That was the examples like Ivan Movements debate about the first Barlow evidence. One, you can classify the liberal economy from both the materiality does nothing because it only changes the form of violence, not the actual magnitude. The second Barlow evidence we saw because social and social death. Answers is also your home is back there because it creates full optimism. It's not Sullivan. And since Black American new strategy, the Black Americans new strategies extending the other welfare date. This can function as a full optimism with and this how the black guarantees psychosomatic, how the strategies flourishing in anti-black good framework. Words are never neutral. They formulate the way they make. Dialogue constructs in relation to the round form is content because debaters become pawns to fulfill the USFG as a savior complex. Their performance that only one form of politics is good in microaggression. And the reason that you should vote them down. Yes, we get away the impacts of the 180 because any that their model debate is anti-black is enough, and the reason that you should vote them down. This turns all their self-questioning mechanism because form of which evidence. FP9. Participants deliver speaking people attention to the attitudes and diversion consistent with the speaking delivery. Speaking participants more modern counter interpretations. You should surrender the resolution to blackness. The USFG is an instrument which has power and the black border structures the red. That's stopper. And how white supremacy forms of immigration policy, black and black framework is more useful for pragmatically addressing the issues of shaping ontological reality, anti-black racism, physiological social organization, social organization, immigrant rights, and responsible engagement in USA's and instrument of racial power. Prefer our model debate. One, first is predictable, the wood basis specific to immigration policy proves that it's intimately tied. Second, that it's limited. After to begin resolutional analysis at the block border formulated method to resist status quo that's first. Sorry, defense one. Switch side proves predictability. If you already answer the affirmative diagram, then two is to solve your offense. Second, that the discretion possible means you cannot solve limits or predictability. Because advantages like hedging warning aren't in the resolution, but we still debate them because if you have interesting question of a general predictability, that means that your debates are just bad and have zero topic education and they probably impact a general predictability with all the ontology stuff above. Next, our offense one. Firstly, white limits that predictability is not neutral but ideological, universalizing where they choose to find predictability, hegemonic whiteness that pathologizes deviant ways of debating and recreates microaggressions in the community which outweighs because debate loses value as a pedagogical activity. Second, say black borders just add that women are the black border between civil society and anti-blackness because transgression only happens when certain people are being respectable. Third, say governability that debate is currently invested in the structural inclusion of blackness into legal systems of liberal incorporationism, state-centric research models, trades off of radical black activism by creating a cool hub that reforms and anti-black violence for this exclusions of their interpretation. Pursuant to certain theories like Louisville's Hudson making a point, it should not have happened in the first place. These procedural rules are used to exclude minorities and detachments. We find it which turns out their switch arguments frequently. But we were having some debate on some real policy making the sense of policy making some space and detachment. We are not immune to the colonial slaves, the opportunities of policy making impersonal or imperialist personal through system power of religion remains hegemony. The TA and switch pathologized as Pavlovitz. As if the argument of the person who actually starting doing the right way is the every kind of privilege pointing the most for the marginalized and how they should be capturing the way person was the right way because it was his way white Americans done and rules and reasonability competing interpretations. Arbitrarily holds is responsible for cheating the age that we may debate. It's possible not harm on a case by case basis, and if we have reasonable cases to be atopical, which turns all the stairs, you can classify the Sullivan 17 errors that I've run on case here, prove that resistance strategies can still happen under probably better and probably better and solve other idea testing arguments because they're second and third level clash testing because the question of resisting strategies or resisting strategies that can combat anti-blackness procedural fairness, and they're not debate outflow debates a white fantasy piece that reproduces anti-blackness as bulletin, and it goes point ever meet white debates institutional practices the whole idea that we treat everyone equally and more obviously discussion of public we or the police violence fair play, you'll be reproducing the cost like fairness chances and how we make the maximum amount of order while presenting ourselves something the best intention customer which institutional reform is better, provides this motion that keeps antagonism day every black and brown body does all of the thing you love is a third past conclusions for a way of incorporating black and brown bodies to other people debate. Fairness is only an external link to education so that anyone who in impact into their education model is fact. Unfairness is good one. It forces you to think on your feet and prepares you for the structural disadvantages that overdetermined procedural fairness solves. Their offense better second is cognitive dissonance services a teachable moment for non-black people. Go to CAP. Or the new flow. Topicality in CAP is a double bind. He tries to delineate between productive and unproductive models of clashing deliberation, which conflicts the thesis of the creed. Profound contradictions are motivation because for revolutionary potential contradictions from disembodiment, which goes psychic energy to kidnap structures of violence, even if it's not a reason, but there are proofs that form overdetermined contradictions we all can't solve. We go to CAP. Social method gratuitous violence overcodes violence offers capitalism and anti-black violence because there is no rationality unless there's not productive like Captain Polyglot threw them off the ship, which proves that social method precodes violence permutation due both truthfully black and communities of care. Our hero resistance neoliberal paradigms and modern politics intimate proves that we can be back and political. They need to win how pedagogy in rock that's violence permutation to the all in the maroon community. There's no mutual access community with the political orientation of the all the link term versus communities holding to a high threshold. There's no with the African divide the movement. It forms a community that refuses to participate in a model debate that delineates productivity. Second is semiotics. Third degree does not account for semiotic capitalism that transcended through science and enterprise. Third is the liberal economy of regency politically classified. The Chico 11 evidence that all debate contingency design. The alternative is just a reformation of civil society within the inside of the black border that relies on humanism, but still ignores the terminal zone of non-ontology as the order, which means that even in the order of the alternative is a continuous free exploitation of the times whiteness is that it fractures. The movement that elephants the fiction are represented industrial economy, environmental labor, capital, human capacity, knowledge, science, and symbols, images, and representational forms are appropriated for the control of the struggle. We want to our president from class of Western bourgeois, especially human entity that the coloniality of power, confidence, the over-representation and roots of analysis that Marxist paradigm proposes a relationality look on the black with the all just a contingent version that Barber as the workers are associating capacity for analogical relation with the exploiter, the uranium through the denial of blackness position as a same reason analogy constitution, whose is a common being whose being is made coherent premise on the real on the non-being of the same anti-black, racial ontologies, condition, possibility, Marxist demand, and pathology design. They all pathologizes black resistance. The assumed that maroonish is not pragmatic or political enough, which intensifies the binary between respectable black resistance and giving ones under our model debate. Cross-play our pragmatic example of change of maroonish can constitute reject their extinction area with the fear of the activist Mitchell. And some extinction taken that movement Western face, but the end of the world, the Western subject of the divine mind, humanity, directly, Western ideas, conducting the destruction of humanity, opposite, thunder, thrill of aggression, progress, pleasure, derived from exposure, is something about which one is involved in. Archetype repulsion.
Alright, are you good?
Yeah.
Alright, what does it mean to surrender the resolution to blackness?
Sure. I think the next line that I kind of talk about explains this to me is that, are you talking about in terms of what apps look like under our interest?
Sure.
Okay, so apps should theorize, the specific things that I say is that the app should begin or understand blackness as a singularity and should begin at the black border to theorize a method to resist anti-black violence.
Just to clarify, Affirmative should center their theories around explaining anti-black violence and then providing a solution.
Not necessarily. It should center around the black border.
I just wanted to clarify.
Strategies to combat anti-black.
How does on the black border decide on framework? How does the resolution demand a respectable subject?
Sure. The black border design argument that I made on framework talk. I actually think that was that was the black border design because the black border kind of delineates between ontology and non-ontology. We think that people that I guess perform or people that do certain different types of debates are kind of pathologized under your term because they're marked as deviant or shouldn't be included.
How does setting the resolution as a floor lead to the pathologization?
We think that action is not neutral but ideological. What I mean by that is that the top line of the 2AC was that words are not neutral. Your interpretation still forces people to defend the USFG as letting in these immigrants. We think that's bad because it portrays the USFG as a savior complex.
Okay, so it's bad because it portrays the USFG as saviors.
Also, like, people
How-
that don't want to defend the USFG
How like
have to.
how do any AFs? How does any AF do that if it has to criticize current USFG action?
No, the app is like, oh no, you know, like let's let all these immigrants in. The USFG will save all these immigrants. The USFG will save the refugees from whatever crisis they're facing. The USFG will save the asylees when there's no one-to-one correlation between voting gap and
Next.
foreign policy.
Next thing, just above that, you said predictability is not neutral; it becomes weaponized. How does predictability get
It's not
weaponized
that it
against
becomes
what?
weaponized. The argument about the by predictability arguments is that it's not neutral but ideological. What I mean by this is that you don't get to pick and choose or determine certain impositions of predictability because obviously other teams like North Star and like Brooklyn Tech find predictability methods, not contrived policy evidence. Your decision to impose a certain model of predictability upon us pathologists is deviant, basically.
What does it mean to incorporate someone into like the liberal schema?
Sorry, what?
You said liberal incorporationism. What does it mean to incorporate?
Oh, that's like the same like kind of like arguments that we've been making.
Okay,
about-
then it seems like all three of your arguments are the same thing.
No, because the white linguist side is a question of how you choose to impose predictability. The black border side is an argument more tailored to any topic education arguments you're making because there necessarily is a trade-off between blackism that begins micropolitically and macropolitical material changes that don't amount to anything.
Okay, why does there need to, on the case debate, why does there need to be a theory that explains all anti-black violence?
We think that, okay, we opposed a theory that explains all anti-black
I
violence.
understand.
Like, that's not true. And
But
then
why
don't
does there
provide a
need, no, my question is why does there need to be a theory that explains all anti-black violence?
Because, wait, we have provided a theory that explains all anti-black violence. In order to
You're
disprove
not answering my
that,
question.
No,
I'm
we're
saying
saying
in order
the burden to
disprove
disprove that argument.
you have to provide a counter theory, or else
Yeah.
just like you
Okay.
go after assumption.
All right, we'll take a little bit of prep. 8 minutes.
I'm gonna run to the restroom if y'all don't mind.
$7:34. Should be sent.
So I thought this would be the perfect time to be like, I'm just gonna leave my cane account because I'm in the process of transitioning away from it. I'm doing physical therapy, basically since I graduated. And I was like, okay, it's all in one hallway, right? I'm gonna go upstairs, get in the lift, go back to my hotel, right? I woke up this morning, my leg wouldn't extend, it was stuck like this, you know how you get paralysis sometimes, right? It's just like partial that. It took me like 15 minutes to get my leg out and to like get it to work and stuff, and I'm walking fine today. I got my leg is turned in today. So I'm gonna go back to my physical therapist and be like, so, I gave it a shot.
I noticed yesterday that you didn't have it, but I wasn't sure if maybe it was just like around somewhere.
No, exactly, because I just ditch it in a corner or whatever, right? Just like classic me. But yeah, no, I've been doing physical therapy for over 2 years now. And
That's cool. And it's helping.
yeah, well, I can do most of my daily life without it now. This is the unique situation because I'm on my feet so much and I have to run around between rooms so much and stuff like that. And I'm just not prepared for it as I need to be.
Or,
You need a new sheet like Atticus?
no, it's just framework.
Nobody's as cool as Atticus, I guess.
Overview's like 45 seconds, hopefully.
Whatever.
I'm not doing all the impacts at the top, so.
Whatever.
Is it just that sheet?
Just framework, yeah.
Seriously, someone now.
That was really
That was
impressive.
Yeah.
left-handed and overhand. I just want y'all to notice that happened, and I'm right-handed. I used to play basketball many years ago.
All right. Is anyone not ready? Debate is a game where two sides compete and one side loses. Any affirmative must explain why we switch sides. There has to be a winner and loser, why there are structural rules we both agree to follow. The resolution consists not of a fundamental consensus on immigration policy, but it states to ensure balance after their ground. This selectively skirts the topic to gain a competitive advantage. Here's the framing issue for evaluating the framework debate with respect to political ontology. The risk that we are right outweighs the risk that we are wrong. If we are wrong about the potential for progressive reform, the worst that happens is a set of debates centered on the resolution in which debaters become progressively more informed about Afro-pessimistic scholarship. If we're right, the ASK model sees the potential for all nuanced political engagement devolves into a set of totalizing and essentializing pessimistic debates that don't encourage students to expand their political horizons. This means in order to vote AF, it's not just sufficient to prove pessimism in the abstract, they must prove zero value exists in debating alternatives to pessimistic scholarship. We don't need to prove an overarching sweeping theory to disprove every part of their theory, but just that topical versions of the AF exist to facilitate productive debates over the nuances of anti-blackness and counter the dogmatic adherence to one ideology, especially since it's just messed up to have non-black debaters winning debates by proclaiming the death of black people. They say words formulate stuff. They don't have evidence or scientific backing for the scientific signifier thesis. Obviously, win that libidinal economy on case. We don't need to win ontology to win this debate. Plus, our framework offense means our conceptions of words and their meanings is pedagogically superior to their switch side obviously resolves the savior complex argument because we're merely open to the possibility of resolution being true through axiomatic refusal of stationary discussion develops into the dogmatic refusal of contestation that amplifies the link to self-question. They say microaggressions, topical debates don't preclude multiple forms of politics, that'll be TVAs. It enables AF specifically centered on refugees from Uganda or South Sudan, pessimism arguments, critiquing the axis of liberal incorporationism. Our model is value neutral, doesn't describe any one of these strategies as good, but their model forecloses the potential for clash and preparation in their haste to curtail the scope of acceptable political orientation. Dogs send self-questioning here. Debates unique because we negate what we affirm. Always defending one political position entrenches opinions, but debates reach this paradigm enable self-reflexivity and the possibility to change minds. Actions can change by force people to grapple with new scholarship requires negative engagement, not analog to ensure links versus disinvestment debate. Arguments don't determine one's political investments. People vote for and read arguments they don't believe in all the time. Chaos teams read framework, flat teams read head jabs and structural cases of the neg, etc. Stepping back from individual beliefs between debaters prior to technical analysis of arguments who are feeling to dispositions, reducing the personal stakes for discussion, encourages debaters to question assumptions which can change minds. Second is pre-on deliberation, good insight, psychological studies and deliberation, unprepared responses lead to cognitive shortcuts which fall back on biases, whereas thorough preparation as well as assumptions predictably increases the witness to clash instead of resorting to exclusionary impulses, making the AF legible in the language of policy, forcing neg teams to substantively responsive, automatically pulling out team. For example, debates relative left-wing atmosphere means that debaters with racist biases to come up with non-racist arguments against topical AFs. They see the counter-interpretation. They tell none of our offense first, no stasis, right into blackness is vacuums can be easily re-extrapolated later rebuttals, proving it doesn't provide a stable stasis for clash. Second, it justifies AFs to defend nothing. Theorizing blackness is maximum captivity. It's not a necessity and advocacy which engenders moral truisms that evacuate the role from the neg. Third, doesn't solve limits, justifies infinite number of AFs, which literally do not even discuss immigration, unprickly sitting the terms of the discussion. Fourth, it's not resolutional, multiple implications. Eighth one is not predictable, absent resolutional grounding. There's no means of reasonably anticipating. This is the model for the topic and centering prep on it. B points a slippery slope, deviating from the resolution, so just as AF teams not defending any part of the topic at all. Hold the AF accountable for the consequences of disavowing the resolution. Regress into interns that theorize immigration to capitalism or instead of closism just because they chose anti-blackness doesn't mean it was predictable. Fifth, no bright line for a constitutionally acceptable act as a hedge with two preempts at the bottom about anti-blackness count. They say now I'll also extend the TVAs here because it answers the USOGs or instrument to racialized power. First, the United States government should substantially increase its resettlement of refugees from Uganda and South Sudan. That solves badly until 18th independent South Sudan bill planning shrinking revenue. Economic stability by public forecast South Sudan began increasing politically some labeling the country fails states. Summative increase in pessimistic forecastable vision of the future and plans to make these reality and endure balance constitutions persistent development plans to conflict expose alternative being sensitive to finds only by turmoil among their card at turmoil. Second, remove criminal context as a deciding future factor in one's immigration status and increase immigration programs specifically for black refugees that removes a material constraint that causes massive over-incarceration and violence. Morgan, Trust 16, we have overwhelming the universal criminalization and immigration enforcement system has a huge impact on the state of black immigrants. This Black Alliance for Just Immigration visa, the immigration system would be redesigned figure policy and shift the focus away from criminal context to the second factor as immigration status. Mark their card immigration status. Third, the United States federal government should enact legislation that fulfills the demands of the National TPS Alliance that supports the demands of black activists who call for urgent political action. Warrant 18, the National TPS Alliance and the groundwork collective taking for students, Negroes, and liberators of TPS that will lose protection on March of Congress and after disrupting the narrative that TPS only impacts the continuing communities of members of black African, Caribbean, Afro-Descendant immigrants. We call in the House to pass a clean standalone bill. They say predictable lit base. It's not predictable or limited. That was answered above. They say switch side debate proves predictability. Two AC blocks don't solve. Most are perms in defense and AFs always get to leverage your AF. They say fiat's extra topical. Wrong advantages can't be extra topical because they're distinct from the mandates of the plan. This argument provides uniqueness for us because it proves a negative extrovert. It's already high and the AF exacerbates it so as to be insurmountable. They say predictability is ideology and pathology. To make the one error is Hercules the threshold for the length of pathology. If it's just you criticize our model of debate and that's anti-black, it's a dangerous model. There are good and bad forms of politics advanced by black people. Meaningful advancement is impossible. Absent the ability to constructively criticize political methods. Self-questioning proves that their model merely cements dogma, doesn't induce racist debaters into changing their minds. To make dialogue between non-black people and black people impossible. So any K-word against them like Capper psychoanalysis would also be construed as pathologizing because they implicitly tell the AF what to do, what they did wrong. That polarizes the community further. It means their model can't solve this. In the extreme case, the implication is we let Ben Carson off the hook for his political views because he's black, and let's non-black people off the hook because they can avoid engagement with black scholarship. They say black borders just add first state link to a threshold where it constitutes a respectable subject. Any counter replicates exclusion. Any restriction leads to policing, which reduces problematic practices. A model which we are not willing to enforce. Any norm for standard is worse because they police minority expression since they require a particular orientation towards the law. Second, not justification about that problematic debate practices are a result of internalized racist and sexist biases, not a consequence of a reasonable attempt to ensure stasis. B, topicality is a pick out of endorsing a non-topical statement while agreeing that debate must be reformed. Also, questioning often proves that research forces debaters to confront internalized biases. They say governability. First, it may or may not be good. Endorsing resolution debate is not a value statement that ontology is false or progress is possible. Our argument is that it's a debatable position where there is not a singular truth. There are plenty of authors that criticize their theory as totalizing and centralizing as per the case debate. This proves which side solves for often because they can read fugitivity on the neg and analyze the intersection between the state and race-based policies on the app. But if they're correct, the state is always bad. It can never be ethical. That model data is bad because it turns the app into a moral truth, which was explained above. Second, no link. The TVAs prove there are plenty of strategies that engage the state without endorsing the incorporation of black people within it. For example, the refugee CVA's negative state actions and repudiation of Trump's racist and colonial policies enables refugees who want to come to escape violence. Third, refuse the absolute use that they are fugitivity. They play the game of debate and ask for balance from judges supposedly part of a hegemonic institution. Utilize cost-benefit analysis with frames like terms to deal with critiques and collide speech trumps and technical debate norms to win the round. Some level of institutional orientation is inevitable because debate is an institution. They say exclusion. First, we only limit what you can say, not who can enter debate. The topical version proves our model is not inherently exclusionary, merely necessitates tailoring the 1AC to a plan. In arenas like debate, which are structured to be competitive, some preset rules are necessary to have a basis for discussion. Second, some exclusions are inevitable. Debates competitive structure means, for instance, every round will have a winner and any counter-interpretation replicates exclusion. Absent limits, the topic is infinitely expansive, which hurts under-resourced debaters the hardest. Third, there's a distinction between illegitimate exclusion and procedural fairness. Exclusions are external features society voting app can't solve, but a limited topic fosters self-reflexivity, which is explained above. They say reifies hegemony. Detachment is good, otherwise the ballot becomes a referendum on debaters' personal identities, which is dangerous for a high school debate round. We all realize debate has no influence on our politics, but our model is better for nuanced clash. They say pathology, that was answered above. They say the Sullivan evidence will be answered on case reasonability doesn't apply, obviously, because our limits prove that your offense isn't reasonable. You explore the topic. They say procedural fairness upholds debate as a white fantasy space. They'll explain fairness here. Their model makes engagement impossible, exposed to racial burden, the lack of a stable advocacy enables constant app shifting. Fairness comes first. First is an independent impact and prior to the app. Intrinsic good in the context of a competitive activity. Before you feel comfortable voting app, you should determine there is a fair basis on which you adjudicate substance. It's contradictory vote on fairness of app. Does that mean you fairly evaluate their arguments, conclude the app is a good idea, and therefore fairly voted for them? This proves a lack of fairness renders debate incoherent. Second, it's the only impact on the scope for you're about to solve. Voting for them doesn't resolve anti-blackness in debate, but voting for C remedies procedural inequalities caused by their app. Third, it's the only way the game works. It undergirds competitive incentive to research and prep, engage in clash in the round, argument evaluation, out-of-run discussion and prep solves for education. Offensive fairness ensures the 2 hours in debate are productive. This protects under-resourced debaters from impossibly large research where their interest exacerbates resource barriers, which makes debate pay to play and creates an exclusive community. If it seems like small programs benefit from planet classes exclusively because large programs are bound to the topic now, they say teachable moment. First, arbitrarily being job causes backlash instead of engagement. Teachable moments are impossible if teams feel seriously cheated. Their argument is about one-off demonstrations, not intense research or activity like debate. Teams are way more invested in winning debate because it's a month of camp, prep, etc. But second, self-questioning solves clash and prep are the basis for a changing mind. For example, a self-love Haitian refugees advocate teach crucial impact calculus for ignoring ongoing exploitation, forces policy barriers to confront that as the future of immigration policy that was impacted above. Third, create a teachable moment for Coppell by voting negative. I guess I'll just finish the cards on the TVAs. Finishing the criminalization card. Black immigrants have been disproportionately affected by these laws. Congress is worsening the criminalization of black immigrants through rollback of punitive deportation and detention policies. Congress should enact clause in immigration program protecting black immigrants and expecting war against conditions.
There's the trust of.
That was the second of Morgan Trossel and Zane. Yeah. The first card was marked at turmoil.
Oh yeah, I don't care so much about that. I just mark when you mark them, just so that I know that they were marked.
Okay.
Right? And since we're back and finished it, I want to make sure that I.
All right.
You good?
Yep.
Alright. Overview, you say topical version of the app creates productive debate. What is the threshold for productive debate?
I'm sorry?
Top of the overview, you say topical version of the app creates a productive debate. What is the threshold for a productive debate?
A debate where both sides have the opportunity to prepare for the arguments presented so that they can have clash in round.
Okay, that's fine. The changing minds argument, like people read arguments they don't believe in all the time. What evidence do you have that says that speeches don't affect subjectivity?
Speeches don't affect subjectivities?
Yes.
Well, it's empirical examples of people in debate. For example, teams that switch sides and read different arguments every round. It's not like reading CO2 ag for a round means you automatically believe in that argument. Our point is that the process of iterative clash and research for a year is a far larger internal link to changing subjectivities because it's that which ultimately influences debaters over the course of the season.
The TVAs, we made some arguments about how bottom-up black radical activism, the bleeding of the black border, trades off of materiality. How do you talk about the black border under the TVA?
Well, for example, the border violence that was articulated in what I see cross-six as a manifestation of anti-black immigration policies.
I'm talking about the black border.
Okay, in what sense?
In the sense that we explained during what I see, like what
Okay,
is
so-
ontology and non-ontology.
Obviously, the ontology debate will largely be resolved on case. Our point is that reading ontology on the AF is problematic because it ascribes a totalizing and essentializing theory to the resolution, which should be debated about instead. I.e., if you are correct that ontology is true, then we should have a course of debates about that over the season where debaters learn about that. But if you're wrong, you see the potential for all liberatory and progressive reforms.
Why don't you go through the cafe?
What? My partner will address that in his next speech.
Okay. Why does Bellarmine get to determine what is predictable and what isn't predictable?
Because there's a resolution.
The resolution determines that.
Yeah, we're not determining what's predictable. We define the resolution. You didn't counter
Other
the
teams
resolution.
have different interpretations of what the resolution means. Why do you get to determine that
Yeah,
your understanding of the resolution is
Because we read definitions, we believe that it sets a predictable limit on the topic. Obviously, you didn't really counter-define the resolution either, so I'm not entirely sure what this argument gets you.
I guess let's go back to the TBAs. Do you need to go for all three of them in the 2AR?
No,
Okay, why is that okay to kick out TBA?
because we can, I mean, if you make arguments against the TBA in 1AR, we can concede they don't solve. That doesn't prove that the resolution itself is flawed or a model debate that's
fine.
bad.
What are criminal contact restrictions?
Criminal contact restrictions, the evidence, I believe, describes, for example, putative deportation and detention policies.
Okay, is under your resolution, is the status within USFG or is the status within the entire resolution?
The entire resolution. Our argument is that deviating from the resolution.
If somebody gets up and reads like an HSI app and the impacts and the advantages are like hedge and warming, why is that a good topic?
Look, obviously, like, every debate is not going to come down to, like, anti-blackness read on the app. Our point is teams that want to defend anti-blackness can do so on the app, and teams that can criticize it from the perspective of anti-blackness. Like, your model doesn't guarantee debaters read anti-blackness around either.
Sen. The Cap K, the new flow case. Is everyone good? Alright. On the Cap K, concede the permutation, the link terms, they don't necessarily generate the politics that are necessary for form. Our criticism is not of a pragmatic action, but it is of not having political action, which are two distinct things, because you can pragmatically organize communities of care, but they don't necessarily engage politics a way that's necessary. The next argument is about the pathology dissent, because that's the only thing that can be classified as an independent voter. Our criticism also is about a lack of politics, which means we aren't pathologizing them, because our criticism is that it is not political. We didn't read an extinction scenario, so they don't get access to their criticism, the new flow. It's not a contradiction. We provide arguments about different competing resistance strategies, one that involves reformism in the state, and they are having one that's about ontology and the way the communities of care operate. The performative contradiction is not necessary for revolutionary potential, because it's just a question of whether a political action is good. We're going to win that a pragmatic and political action is good, and that both are necessary. The next argument is about how form overdetermines content. We think that both matters, both the content of debate and the process of debating that generates iterative testing are important, but they are invested more in the form of debate that is about fairness via line-by-line speech times, etc., which over-determines their transgressiveness. Case debate. The case debate should determine a lot of the offense, because debates about libidinal investments don't necessarily change how society or debate itself operates on a larger scale, i.e. they can have debates about the black border and whatnot, but that doesn't necessarily change that people agree and will disprove social death below by anti-black violence. But then debate can change, but they foreclose that opportunity, because it means that we don't necessarily engage in debates that produce those education. The communities of care argument assumes that politics can never do anything which will impact turn below. So go to the movement's turn now. Our model of debate is the only one conducive to movement building, which is an education turned into a model. Other models breed apathy to very real issues surrounding the political sphere. Political movements are effective, and Montgomery, NAACP, March on Washington, sit-ins, etc., all over which were in our evidence. None of these completely remove the stigma on blacks made by each man. Material reduction on the magnitude of anti-black violence. Their model hinders these movements. First is mechanism education. Strategic organizing best educates us on how to change policies is vital to create a locus for organization, and movements empirically fail without changeable blueprints for political action because all radicalism necessarily opposes state structures. Next is that detail is a matter of funding, implementation, congressional authority, core precedent of these both inform and risk suppressing movements that absent a politically informed focused educational model. Yes, they might have some arguments about communities of care, but those are just about retreating away from politics instead of engaging it. Second is the first argument is decision making. The debate must be organized around politics, locking discussion solely to the realm of ideological impedes and pragmatic action necessary to unsettle entrenched power relationships. This logic is what enables the Trumpian victories that sustain dictatorships abroad. Instead, you should prioritize the strategy of masonry. The North Carolina students who work to desegregate school counters the Congress of Racial Equality, which started the Freedom Rise campaign, the Berkeley and anti-Vietnam movements all demonstrate the efficacy of political change, even if none of which totally reduce anti-black violence. The libidinal economy argument is libidinal economy is definitely important, but libidinal desires can change. Policies created anti-black violence, i.e., through the slave trade, which generates the way that modernity has viewed anti-blackness, which means that they can also happen in the reverse direction, i.e., we can use modernity to be weaponized against the way that modernity uses anti-black violence. The Dull test argument just proves that people have anti-black violence, anti-black desires, which is true, but not necessarily that it can't change. The next argument is that they'll pretend they're pragmatism argument. They'll pretend they're pragmatic, but there are pragmatic actions that are not pro-institutionalism. On the movement's turn, we'll win that foreclosing politics by just creating movements that care is bad. The next argument is that about their model of debate. Our model of debate generates the education necessary for movements. I did that above. Sure, they might not necessarily have a one-to-one correlation, but it generates the education necessary to have those movements. Are your evidences about performance debate, not their affirmative? Their performance assumes black agency and the possibility for black roots, grassroots activism. Theirs doesn't do that. Ontology debate. Top level framing issue for every line by line argument. Cross-text proves it's impossible to test whether something is trans-historical or ontological. You should be scared to be a negative because it adopts a fatalistic orientation without knowing whether any of their claims are true. This is the work of white supremacy by stopping black resistance in politics. Blackness isn't ontological, they're tautological and circular. The three pillars apply equally to religious persecution in the 1500s, even if they seem fixed at the time. Human systems are malleable. It's impossible to have perfect knowledge of registers that, like ontology, that supposedly operate prior to our existence. But we do know things such as Dempsey v. Moore or Schroeder versus Virginia stopped courtroom lynchings and let black people into juries. Also, anti-blackness isn't an inherent law of physics. A law of physics inherent to the universe. They can win their descriptive claims about natal alienation, social death, etc. But the implication of 16th century slavery is not that the state can never make lives better. Also, if they win their claims, it's not enough to just lean the ontology tree. You need to be certain because the risk that we're right outweighs the risk that we're wrong. That was done in the 2NC. Also, our job is to provide an alternative totalizing theory to anti-black substantiation. The first argument there isn't a sweeping theory of everything. So indicts of particular narratives of little progress don't matter because neither we nor the resolution are tied to it. Their synaptic rewards argument filter. Synaptic reward through non-falsifiability. They're making broad neurological claims without any neurological evidence. Even if they do rewire their neurological attachments, they do it in a way that refuses engagement with the state is bad. The Gordon evidence is explicitly about semiotics. His claim is that signs are created by explicit choices people made. The Sullivan evidence does not apply. The biological studies go the other way. The way they cited Sullivan is that hope leads to stress universally, but the actual study itself says that hope leads to stress only when confronted by racially motivated accidents. Here's what the Sullivan study says. That's been all 12. African American men who high levels of hope upstairs, hope appears to be correlated with assessment of politics and a realistic understanding. Marked up understanding, so it's just the last 4 words that weren't written.
Sorry, how much do you have?
360. Space 434.
Yeah, that's it.
Zero ballots and we can send ballots. 304.
This is super side note. Since you're Texas, do you know Jesuit well?
Yeah.
Who's Ryler and who's Jack?
Bojack is
Like, he just
Jack's
speaks
got
positions?
brown hair and Ryler has,
Like, I'm gonna be
Ryder has like freckles.
hang on,
do you know which
I
one's
wrote it
two-way?
down, I wrote
I
it
know
down.
the 282.
Which one's what?
So Bojack is the one.
I wrote it down.
He has brown curly hair.
Here you go.
Okay. Perfect.
Every local song. Yeah.
I keep forgetting to ask people, and then I don't submit my ballot like right at the time, and then I'm like, oh no.
Our local tournaments are Jesuit, Green Hill, St. Mark's. Ooh, they're
Bet.
Yeah, we got to see the ladies.
We're gonna do for your hat.
I'm gonna go to the case page of one in our order, then the TV.
Case then what?
Framework.
Oh, okay. I thought there was something.
We used to call it fraternicality. Whatever.
Anybody not?
Voted for to construct new element to understand the middle border. It's a material rewriting of neural wires that first revision to analyze against all the whole that understands the middle passage is the first ever immigration policy putting out. This is an affirmation of model politics debate that leads from state-centric frames towards create social life outside social life, the impact of social death practice, was rendered much more about options, change the road, cyber opportunities towards itself, option immigration, lead to shoes, migration, deportation, the liberal economy stuff. I'll do here, it's objective, there's a frame which you already hear the one that was coming in order for them to win the political economy. They have described what laws, explain every one of our examples, otherwise there's nothing to overturn and substitute. But what can slave master institution or making excuses for irrational feelings. I was then three examples, there's no reason for the power to crack the institution why the latter exists on safe for our deviants on the church or identical competition. The second is adult testimony, kids on the age of 3 church between the white black dog, the overwhelming choose to white dog, another reason racial superiority, third is the only shot 41 times. Only the middle economy spent by one black man and shot 41 times rather than 40 men once. The reform debate, it's subsumed by the middle economy worked out above it. Proves there's no way to change the symbolic nature of black statistics. Also explicitly concede all three pillars of social death. Don't make me reinvent the wheel. The alien nation proves that black is forced to migrate from one place to another or remain on the same location because these several types of humanity, optimism, we all preclude optimism should just exist outside of society. Will impact term political hope and intensifies psychological blindness through hope and safety puts implementation which creates an external impact of self-harm through generalized anxiety. That was the governability to set on the over the rereading of Sullivan that the read flows out because the part they read explicitly sets a high levels of hope lead to bad forms of politics because it provides cruel optimism that the state can reinvest within structures that are good. The mechanisms we do provide mechanisms because Maroonish has detailed orientation of examples which just exist outside of the state. They're in Paris. I'll do them here. There's a couple filters for their Paris. They can see a time cumulus out passes which floats the burden. Their examples of progress are not representative of time. If their burden to prove net progress happens otherwise, for examples, know that the industrial complex is seen for child slavery, but rather in Paris are counterbalanced with new forms of violence. The two in our burden to prove why anti-blackness violence has not changed despite the political register. They say ontology stops white supremacy false and invigorates social life within social death. That's the thesis of lynchings have been replaced with the Paris industrial complex, which proves that there's a re-articulating of violence. The ontology debate is subsumed by the middle economy above. We prove it's objective and they have no law to explain it, then there's no way to change it. Good team. They conceded words are not neutral, just saying we have no warranted evidence to substantiate. I'll do it here. They formulate the evangelical construction relations to work through medicine and content. We articulate how they concede the evidence that needs form is content because it formed the U.S. and changed the state comment for fulfills debaters to fulfill the role of slave master. They have no evidence to substantiate that flipping side doesn't create subjectivities, so you default after words and framework the reading of the understanding. Vote them down. They attend the one world politics center discussions is strongly committed against race and creates a certain feeling they were black division outlook and results in the psychological impact of the situation between cheating blacks and respectable ones. By the PRL obviously doesn't have a policy that limits how black people their model debate. That's the same fact. They say debates game of they concede orientation happening in that grade. They say I'll do their wrong ontology framing that we're wrong is worse. We are nihilism which takes after 1% framing that we're wrong. It means that the failure to embrace pessimism results in psychological violence because give true hope that the state influence implementation. It also has an external impact on maximum captivity. It doesn't strive out political movements because we still think that those should exist outside the state, i.e. the affirmative. They say it's best up for debaters not black. One, it's a question of what is scholarship. We've read black authors which proves it's not a personal referendum on us, but and does not result in fungibility. They say I'll do the net benefit where communities of care outweighs because they have literally no offensive way of accessing it. These striking all black judges don't start not being invited to the Green Hall round robin. The decide that the TOC reading will question no matter what black TV debate, white debaters, some black ones are being too loud. All prove the unique question. The status quo debate acknowledges deviance, i.e. deferred arguments. Only our bishop debate creates virtual reaction, which is a concealed salty vector coming out of block. It rewrites neural functions. It denies the snatch word about for negative. Who upholds a white base debate. They concede the DSR evidence has an influence in community norms, which uniquely justifies the action on protects and traits communities where black debaters provide better psychological help than resistance checks can be actualized here now. The counter interpretation debates are in the resolution of black institutions, the opposites of black order improves any discussions. It's a prerequisite is predictable and tied to immigration. Any reason we are improves the weather resistant. Opposite seems like we're going to take no start. The graphs not predictable because they compare least methods and trios like and hydraulic whiteness. The suicide debate. There's no performance system. There's a performance system that doesn't result that was above. Results in white fluidity shifting and mold systems every time which decides exactly how the institution remains itself. Impact on the medicines arguments. Predictable limits we solve through the counter tradition, but we impact and resolution predictability doesn't justify the cases because they're starting the whole glass of defense. Even if the one seems to liberate some blacks in immigration proves that any ground was based on the agent, which results in the process counterplans to the blocks. Also, do make suicide because you could read draft and the negative means that we are predictable. The TVA cases and impact on rear. Clear the resolution also does the self-context. It states like governability links to the future. The dissent. The idea of black performance is only accepted when seen respectful to weaponize black debaters to read a plan like Malachi gets those who don't like judge performance content, which was done on the overview fairness debate. It is an internal league at best. One is context improving for procedural fairness onto minority debaters with value. Lowers emphasis that fairness is a contract still society and exclude against the referee through that literature base are dimension closing. You could write a critique the category. Unfairness is good when privileged students competition temporarily unfair creates cognitive distance and offers opportunity to change which is proven by those who uphold a white face space that means voting down can help us to shift the truth testing arguments. There's no threshold for this argument. The cabinet case also proved tested theory. We don't preclude it. Research solves this argument. I don't have to be the KPN notes. Fucked up the actions and that for all day. Just that ways.
Okay. 734.
Mm-hmm. This shoe quality, not too strong in here. Good one. Just deal with it. Thank you, bless you, because I have a team that needs enough watch. So you just steal those bits away, okay? Because I coached it out of your team. And I had a better union team as well. The problem, no, usually this is common, but you get to see which is, things he's right. Is it something he's listening, coaching?
That's what I thought. This is such a weird.
And then we walked into the quarters debate on, and we had a conversation in the car, and the quarters debate on the conversation in California, and it's perfectly we have to come, right? We were right, and then he said, nay. And the kids walked away from the survey, and that's what we were like, what do you mean, nay? And he's like, it's still candidates there. What do you mean it's still candidates there? We just spent half an hour talking about what we did. Turns out that there's still 16 years. I'm excited to be coaching the Ruger. We call them the Cal team, Fleming and Spurlock. Like Nate Fleming's younger brother and John Spurlock's younger sister. Yeah. Which should I be judging? Oh, sure, of course. Yeah, we were friendly in that way. Yes. Sure. It's so rough everywhere.
It's just.
Yeah. That's what we do with that. We stop them to decide and the goal is to impact human beings. And that's not what happened. It was nothing to do with prayer, it's just a whole thing. We had trouble with prepping that debate in addition.
It'll be framework case, or like T case.
You want to read the shutdown dissad? Oh wait, that's that issue. We can all write a national emergency dissad.
Although that might also be dead in a couple days.
Who
Today.
knows? Well, it will already be dead today.
Oh no, he already.
Oh, he
announced
already
the
did.
national
Has he actually done it yet though?
Well,
Yeah, he
he's
did.
like
Okay.
said
He did
he's
it in the
doing
Rose Garden, right?
Yeah.
That's what, yeah. So it turns out we don't need any like money for like the campfire and, you know, Northern California where we just.
Yeah,
lost-
there's already a breakdown of the budget of where.
Yeah, money's coming from FEMA, Puerto Rico, and, the campfire. Turns out we don't need money for firefighting for California. Screw us.
All right.
Framework and then the case?
Framework and then case. Anyone not ready? Vote negative for a limited topic that maximizes debate's potential. Self-questioning should frame your decision. Debate's competitive sphere drives the absurd number of hours thousands of high schools across the country put into research and prep a vision of the topic with values, create research and maintains in-round engagement necessary to access any debate's benefits, specifically through self-questioning. Two internal links versus disinvestment of individual rounds do not determine subjectivity. People read and vote for arguments they don't believe in all the time, only defending arguments you already believe in merely entrenches dogma, whereas forcing debaters to switch sides encourages objective reflection on the merits of arguments. Whenever they say in the one air the state's anti-black community to question a relationship to it, it's a signal that you're about to prior to a dialogical model of debate that encourages sustained research research and iterative testing. This proceeds or impact about creating a better educational model centered on anti-blackness. Merely learning about radical ideology doesn't matter if you can't use it to change minds. Second is pre-on deliberation. Psychological studies prove that unprepared responses fall back on existing biases, whereas through preparation and self-submissions, making the athletic the language of policy forces negative to subtly respond instead of automatically pulling out teeth. The other impact is fairness, independent and prior to the act. Every time they say we mishandle the government ability, that it proves they're invested in a technical form of debate where our ability to respond underpins how you evaluate everything else. A lack of fairness renders debate incoherent and vacuous any basis for you to adjudicate debates. The only intrinsic good fairness sustains a competitive research incentive in round engagement, post-round judge deliberation that undergirds every other impact. It's especially important for under-resourced debaters. They've conceded their intern makes debate pay to play, which turns their accessibility claims. Finally, they've dropped there's a larger opportunity cost of losing fairness than any other impact, because it's the only impact that balance solves. A frame for every framework in case somewhere issue. The ontology does not disprove framework. They drop the risk calculus frame at the top of the shoe and see if we're wrong about ontology not being an accurate heuristic, then it'll just cause the teams to debate the resolution and lose on Afropest. If we're right, their dogmatic and totalizing frame forecloses all future liberatory potential and devolves into non-black individuals commodifying the suffering of black folk to win debate rounds. Our monoconstructive progressive research community that feels solely objective reflection of the nuances of black scholarship. Words are not neutral. Argument was not dropped. It doesn't have an impact. We obviously don't need to win ontology. Obviously words aren't neutral, but we're impacting them being bad in the context of the resolution. Switch sides on savior complex. We don't defend the savior open to the possibility of the resolution being true. The dogmatic refusal of all non-pessimistic approaches, myopic and totalizing. Obviously debate can shape their activities. It occurs through focus / not individual speech acts. Respectability. First they link any counter to replicates respectability, so they're interpolices minority debaters who don't want to defend surrendering the blackness. It's paternalistic to say that all black debaters think the same way. Second, any model in which we don't enforce limits is worse, because essentially neoliberalism, because schools with the most resources win, and defines debaters as respectable or not based on resource debaters, which lets a Purell fester mythology. What's the length of model? Construes everything that can criticize Afro-pessimists in this mythology, which is dangerous because there are good and bad forms of scholarship, and the logical implication is letting Ben Carson off the hook. Debaters don't learn anything. Absent the ability for constructive criticism, it means that psychoanalysis or Afro-optimism could also be pathology. I'll answer communities of care here. The AF does not create communities of care. Voting AF just endorses a model debate where teams read untopical AFs and advocacy that wins Coppell more rounds. It doesn't causally follow that's liberatory in any way. Our model of debate is not mutually exclusive of communities of care, because that's not intrinsic to resolutional debate. There's no word for why reading topical plans trays off. UTV is a pick out of everything they view as wrong with debate, like respectability politics, striking black judges, microaggressions, because none of that is intrinsic to T or the resolution. Self-questioning improves. We access the only interlink in confronting racialized biases. The counter-interpretation solves nothing. First, no stable thesis. Surrendering to blackness is vacuous and can be easily recontextualized by crafty AF teams like that there have to be an advocacy as a hedge AF of anti-black preempts count. They drop the debate as inevitably structured by research incentives, so teams have an incentive to defend less. Second, indulge into moral truisms, no check on assets, just say racism bad. Third, they drop the deviating from the resolution as a slippery slope that justifies K-team picking an interp to meet an AF, not an AF to meet an interp, i.e. theorize immigration through settler colonialism or capitalism. We're not talking about immigration at all. Even if their interp seems limiting, they justify a litany of unpredictable options. Fourth is not predictable. Just because anti-blackness has undergirded immigration policy in the past doesn't mean next team should be responsible for centering prep on it, given a history of other contributing factors and theories. Say we lose on process counterplans, we'll lose the potential for all focus clashes. They don't just justify anti-blackness as but secol and cap and ass without an advocacy. All grounded concessionary, realizing the goodwill of 2AC blocks they don't solve. They've conceded perms and hypergeneric defense are present in those blocks, not the basis for a round. TVAs, I'll extend them here. There's three. First, the United States government should increase resettlement of refugees from Uganda and South Sudan. Second, end punitive deportation and detention policies. Third, cease to the demands of the national TBS alliance. All their content-based critiques miss the vote because obviously it is imperfect. It's called net ground. It includes their lip-based, even if it doesn't capture the entirety of the app. It's sufficient to mitigate their offense. Improves our model capture discussions over anti-blackness. They say governability. First, affirming topical debate is not a final determination on the value of state action. Our point is there ambiguity and room for discussion by anti-blackness. There are plenty of authors that criticize their singular ontological focus. The app just evacuates all this discussion by dogmatically presenting social death as the one singular truth. Second, TVAs disprove the potential for reforms that deconstruct problematic state policies. Third, they play the game of debate, ask for ballots, ask you to vote for soft arguments, etc. They're just as invested as we are. The difference is they're monopolizing black suffering for the ballot. TVAs disprove imposition of fairness is valid. Cognitive dissonance, they jot out arbitrarily losing rounds, creates backlash from debaters who never have to grapple with internalized biases because they care about winning. It proves that only our model solves the ontology debate on case. You have yet to hear a metric determining what it means for a structure to be ontological. You're scared about act as a political change. Just think about communities of care, but rather politics is possible. There are examples going both ways, but their examples are fundamentally defensive, i.e. examples that show anti-blackness hasn't changed, whereas ours are offensive, proving the changeability of the structure. They dropped that ontology seemed true for religion in the 1500s, but that change, lack of answers to our examples means you should refer to ontology being false. Examples like Strata v. Virginia or Dempsey being more stock for religions to allow black people onto juries. True, the post-industrial complex disproportionately affects black people, doesn't compare to the horrors of chattel slavery or Jim Crow. We're not optimism or political change possible. We need to manipulate the existing legal framework. Sullivan, their methodology of the study, which was the point of every reading, just hurts black people only if they believe racism doesn't exist. Because when they're confronted with racism in real life, it's unexpected. We solve this because racism exists, but that undergirds programs for political change. Oh, yeah.
Case and framework. Okay. Okay. Framing issue for the ontological debate on cases in the liberal economy. Anyways, that we with this argument proves that their model of debate is invested in the liberal economy of anti-blackness because of its political focus that trades off with competing strategies like the one that affirmative as a free from government that forms communities in the wake of debates, immigration topic to help black people here. And that would debate their arguments about changeability do not make sense because they need to win that laws cause anti-blackness and laws can reverse anti-blackness, but they cannot. When the formers reverse causal arguments make absolutely no sense. They've considered all three examples of the liberal economy in the 200. They've also considered the important framing issue about how time accumulates, and that doesn't pass to prove that for every step that black people take, civil society takes 100 steps. Also proves that civil society always changes the form of violence. Ever obviously that child submission for the person of industrial conflict, but the magnitude of violence has never decreased. It only proves that framing about time accumulated not passing. Also proves all the liberal economy examples that just no conceded in the last week's error. Examples will work here. First, the primary practical decisions, even when the drugs are chemically identical, the latter seen as 800 times more threatening. These on a signifier because preserving the gratuitous signification of the criminal trope on anything that's associated with blackness proves the concept pathologization. Second, the adult has kids under the age of putting in the podcast study constellations of black doll over the white doll associated with bad and ugly proves that this disproves any societal bias. Arguments that Gordon Evans having. Third is the Diablo evidence. Even if you think they're winning, that violence is not predetermined by ontological structures. Gratuitous violence is because only the liberal economy can explain why one black man was shot 41 times, not why 41 black people were shot once. There's no monetary reward except the gratuity of civil society. If we wouldn't subject that means that the framework debate is absolutely over for them because political stasis within governability is bad. And because under their model debate and the TVA is bad because it creates a cruel optimism that the state can do something good for black people. The 2 does not say the word cruel optimism a single time except for their answer for Sullivan. Read their card, they're recutting of Sullivan. It'll definitely flow affirmative in this way because Sullivan literally says word for word political hope or investing in a system is a cruel optimism. When they considered all the examples of the liberal economy, it only proves that it's not a form of optimism because that change can never happen because civil society will only continue to reformulate the violence leading to cruel optimism because anyways, through optimism, the state can do something good. They've considered the equity evidence, which is a huge framing issue because your word over-determines your neural cognition, which is that our speeches affect our subjectivity, whereas they have zero evidence. You can go to the framework proper debate now because the equity evidence frames the way that you look at the framework, and they have considered that it's a comprehensive study of psychologists that have concluded giving speeches over and over again, reaffirm or have the way the amygdala constructs our relations around because form over-determines content. Black people become subject to internal violence by being forced to bow down to the U essentially as the savior comments. Their argument that which side solves the savior comments makes absolutely no sense. The TVA is literally we should let in all these immigrants and portray the USFG as a savior of these refugees and asylums, which obviously there's no one-to-one correlation between voting for an Afghan or their team, whereas there's a ballot war, which I'll go on to later. Under their model of debate, those who refuse are pathologized and deemed irrespectful, which causes push out of migrations in the community, like striking black judges or labeling them as cheaters, or that I was because two syllabuses that strategies under there to create a cruel optimism for black people that keep them focused on civil society. There's 2 arguments. One, it turns out for resistance strategies that black people can develop here. Now 2 is that multiple studies conclude that it causes psychosomatic violence through things like heart attacks and general anxiety, which just goes to drop for black people that drain psychiatry to contest anti-blackness. You need to ask yourself, how can you weigh fairness against psychological violence? Obviously, the latter always proves that only our model of debate that can foster a community of care that's grounded in bottom-up resistance strategies to combat anti-blackness here and now. The net benefit is communities of care. Things like destruction of black judges and North Star not being managed to read around by breaking the TUC all prove that there's some level that they all prove that yes, they are tied to the resolution because these teams are pathologized for not defending the resolution under their model of debate and told, and teams tell them to go back to the drawing board and or just read the team which proves all our offers about how teams are pathologized under their model of debate. It also proves that it outweighs any of their fairness claims because they're just vacuous and don't mean anything when psychological violence is something that your ballot can resolve. The ballot warrant is the tiebreaker because your ballot should be a referendum on impacts that are closest to this debate. If we win, that is a question of participation in psychosomatic health for black computers. It outweighs any of their fairness education offers because they're the same ones that are weaponized to impose a cruelly optimistic model of debate onto black computers. There is a synaptic reward associated with the ballot causes neural rewiring. I'm gonna go line by line here. All of fairness are arguments. Dropping arguments is not a referendum on fairness because the debate should be judged fairly because if the debate should still be judged fairly, you should not have the right to impose certain models of debate on other people. The FC evidence just proves all their limited topic arguments because still form already determined content. The ontology calculus was answered in the 1 year also proves by the objective nature of the liberal economy, which has to be comments I answered about the small schools said. Obviously, they consider that fiat is extra topical, which was in the 1 year, does not answer in the 2 and proves that even under their interpretation, small schools are terminally fucked because teachers just keep reading new and new has a warming advantage and international relations of small schools will never be able to prove because those are not grounded in particularly the ontology framing was not dropped. It does not lead to dogma because we are not in which case there's 1% we are wrong framing. It means that their failure to embrace pessimism results in psychological aspects because it's a cruel hope. It does not strive off action because we think that they should still exist just outside of the state. None of their they say that the communities of care can still exist under their interpretation. No, there's not what they consider the trade-off between bottom-up radical black activism and top-down materiality that continues to perpetuate the liberal economy of anti-black resistance. We're not predictable. It doesn't matter when the white women's side is conceded in the 200%. They do not get to determine where they find predictability. The liberal economy concession means that predictability is not neutral, but ideological, and it's just an imposition of violent debate.